Welcome to the Economic Times CEO Roundtable, partnered by Deloitte. Please welcome our panelists with a round of applause. Priya Nair, CEO and MD, Hindustan Unilever. Uday Kotak, founder, Kotak Mahindra Bank. Sunil Bharti Mittal, Chairman, Bharti Enterprises. Sajjan Jindal, Chairman, JSW Group. Lalit Keshre, co-founder and CEO, Grow. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, Senior Advocate, and Debashish Mishra, Chief Growth Officer, Deloitte South Asia. I now invite Satyan Gajwani, Chairman, Times Internet, to address the audience.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. We're clearly experiencing a lot of turbulence these days. Right now, in India, even a simple domestic flight counts as an act of bravery. But I guess when an economy is growing at 8.2%, some speed bumps are par for the course. Earlier today, this panel of jury members decided the Economic Times Awards for Corporate Excellence 2025. In other words, the makers and movers of India's business and economic destiny. Now, they are here to deliberate, discuss, and debate India's present. The theme of this discussion is crafting the India way in an uncertain world. India is in a sweet spot amidst volatile times. Strategic autonomy is no longer just a buzzword, but it's evident in action, whether it's in our dealings with Trump's tariffs, Russian oil, or Chinese critical minerals. A fast globalizing India is refashioning globalization in its own image. And what is this image? At the core of the India way is aligning our goals with the new world order and knowing the levers to pull for our advantage. And who better than Uday Kotak to help us understand leverage? After all, he leveraged customer obsession to turn a bill discounting business into one of India's most ubiquitous financial services firms over the last 4 decades. It's about empowering our youth with knowledge, skills, and connectivity so that they can help keep India ahead on the technological curve. Who better than Sunil Bharti Mittal, who has built a $100 billion multinational corporation out of India within 1 generation, to tell us about what connectivity and technology can lead to. It's about having the steely resolve to persevere amidst the shifting matrix of allies, friends, foes, tariff wars, and real wars. And who better to speak about staying the course than Sajjan Mittal, who took over two loss-making steel plants in his youth and turned that business into India's largest steel maker, and somehow manages to look like he's only progressively gotten younger while accomplishing this. Friends, I'm so delighted that we're here today in the company of some of India's most inspirational figures. The work Dr. Devi Shetty is doing to make healthcare affordable reminds us all of our responsibility towards fellow citizens and the importance of building a more equal nation. Priya Nair joined Unilever as a management trainee in 1995 and rose to be the global president of beauty and wellness before she was handpicked to lead India. She's the first woman in the job in the 90 years Unilever has been in India. I look forward to listening to the custodian of so many of India's top consumer brands. What does the Indian consumer want? Does anybody really know? And if one were to wonder, would it be possible to replicate today what Sunil Mittal did in building Airtel? One needs to look no farther than Lalit Keshre, who was born into a family of farmers in a small village in Madhya Pradesh and has built India's largest stockbroking platform, becoming a billionaire himself in the process. And he's not yet 45. Friends, our panelists today represent what is possible in India. Like all of you, I look forward to listening to their thoughts. Thank you all for joining us today, and welcome to the ET CEO Roundtable.
Thank you, Satyan. Shrutijit KK, Executive Editor, The Economic Times, will moderate today's discussion. The topic, crafting the India way in an uncertain world. Over to you, SK.
Thank you. Thank you, Satyan, for setting the context so beautifully. It is indeed rare to get a panel of this distinction together. But when I look at the audience, I'm compelled to say, audience bhi koi kam nahi hai. I think we did not introduce in Satyan's speech Mr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi. That is my bad, because yesterday he had expressed his inability to join the panel, but today he has kindly agreed to be here. So we missed it in the speech, but he basically needs no introduction. He's one of India's foremost legal minds. So, sir, welcome. So we'll get straight into it, crafting the India way in an uncertain world. When you look at India today, the macro picture is quite encouraging. India is rather well poised. There is high growth. Inflation is low. FDI has been a little slow, but we are seeing in recent weeks tremendous amounts of announcements. $135 billion this year alone has been committed, as the Times of India says today. GCCs are thriving. A lot of FDI is coming, especially into AI-related infrastructure, data centers. But at the same time, there are concerns. We are not seeing a lot of growth in private capex. State spending is still carrying the economy a whole lot. The consumption story, about which we hope to hear from Priya quite a bit today, needed a tax break. And that is just on the domestic front. On the international front, as we all know, Trump's tariff tantrums are causing problems across sectors. The rise of AI and what that means for jobs, what that could mean for jobs in a few years from now, is indeed a source of anxiety. With that as the backdrop, I want to open it up to our esteemed panelists. What we're going to do is, I would like to have a round of opening statements from all of you, in which if you could mention one thing about contemporary India, about India today, that is a source of pride, satisfaction, and confidence, and one thing that is a source of concern. And if you could approach that question with your own sectoral lens, that would be additionally helpful. We'll start with you, Priya.
I've just come back to the country after being outside the country. And I would say to you that if I had to say one thing that I'm finding that has changed about India, and it's also linked to the sector and to consumer goods, is that 65% of India still lives in the villages. And I think we need to always remember that. And I would say to you, dehat badal raha hai. And that's a very important way in which India is changing. There are more women at work. It's 40% of women now at work in rural India. And we are seeing rural wages for the first time start to go up. So we are seeing affluence grow in rural India. And therefore, I'm coming to it because I think inclusive growth is very important for India.
I think the India of today is about stability, whether it's political stability, whether it's macroeconomic stability. India gives a great picture of a very stable country in a pretty uncertain world. Along with that, I think the Indian of today has changed. The Indian of today compared to the time when we were in college, where most Indians thought about mera future is outside. Most Indians are now ready to think about a future in India. And this confidence is something which we need to sustain and nurture. And that is where our next opportunity and challenge is. Thank you.
Well, I think the scale and size of India is the biggest opportunity. 1.5 billion people, a continent of consumers. Anybody in the world will look at it very favorably. And we can see the growth through the young population, people wanting new products, new services. And that really gives Indian companies a really great deal of heft to do bigger and better things. My area of concern would be innovation and R&D. No nation in the world has become a great power without innovation or R&D. whether it's US or Japan or Korea, and of course in the last couple of decades, China. This is where India is spending much less. I would really say the private sector is spending much less, about 0.5% to 0.75% compared to 6 to 8% of all the nations which are prospering. This is one area where private sector and the government need to come together to figure out a way how Indian industry, even if in short term means compromise on some margins, start to seriously invest in R&D and innovation.
So I believe very strongly in India, so does everybody in this room. So I really believe that today we have this sweet spot. We've been thinking for the last 40 years that when will be the India decade, but I think we are now right there. And whatever we want to do, anybody wants to do in this country will make it success only if he was honest, if he really had the perseverance of the purpose, then anything, any business, any industry, one could make it very big in this country.
I think I'm very excited about the rise of entrepreneurship in tier 2, tier 3 cities. Like if we look at our customers also, like we talk about all the internet entrepreneurs and large companies and so on, but there are a lot of small businesses that are emerging out, and that's kind of something like India also gives the scale and size opportunity. Multiple businesses can emerge out, and I'm concerned about is how can we kind of fund these entrepreneurs across the country.
Well, I think to look at both positives and negatives, it's important to have a somewhat historical perspective. Because without that, we tend to forget our blessings. I always like to ask this question of foreign Indian audiences, oversimplistic but with no easy answer. India happens to be the only country, and it's quite an amazing thought, which emerged out of the yoke of imperialism from the 1930s to the 60s. Some 25, 30 countries, from British imperialism, Dutch imperialism, French imperialism, and so on. It's the only country which has remained a vibrant economy. That's not a small achievement if you look at a historical perspective. And of course, thereafter, if you look at the figures which voted in 51 and the 642 million which voted the last election, half of those women, literacy gains, poverty reduction. So we are, as everybody says, in a sweet spot. And some of the reports say that we should be definitely a developed country, even possibly exceeding US dollar terms in 2050. But unless we are aware of the challenges, and one clear challenge in the limited time available, and Sujit mentioned sectoral, is clearly the underemphasis in the economic sense of one of the best and the brightest sectors, the legal sector, best and brightest in terms of lawyers and judges, and yet this terrible scourge of arrears. The A, B, C, D, where A stands for access, B for backlog, C for cost, and D for delay, is a big dampener for economic growth itself. And unfortunately, one of the major reasons is the politics of the judiciary. The politics of the judiciary would make the politics of politicians blush. And, we've had at any point of time in 75 years, 33% vacancies in the paltry figure of 1,100 high court judges across the country. At any point in 75 years, we've had a remarkable 25% vacancy in the lower courts. So there's just no way in which we can fix this broken system unless we address that. And we need to reduce politics there and increase solid decision making.
I'm quite excited about the way the consumption will pan out beyond $3,000 per capita. I think that's going to be a massive change in the pattern of consumption and the focus finally around manufacturing. That's finally coming back. But I think the way we have laid the foundation for the digital public infrastructure, That gives me a lot of excitement what AI can do going forward on top of this digital public infrastructure. And that can really impact our MSME, our farms, our clinics, our classrooms. What India can give to the world is really citizen-centric and trustworthy AI and its impact on human lives and livelihoods. That will be a big one. On the concern side, I think we need to catch up on total factor productivity, particularly in the MSME. We need to provide them with finance, technology, skill, and that will really boost the next leg of economic development. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for those insightful opening comments. When I look at this panel, I see in many ways the essence of and the power of Indian entrepreneurship. Such landmark companies as Airtel, JSW, Kotak, and Lalit has built Grow. Amazing stories of entrepreneurship, consistency, stretching across decades, and really fabulous outcomes for themselves and millions of shareholders of these very widely held companies. In this regard, Sunil, I would like to come to you to ask, I was listening to a discussion that you were doing the other day where you laid out your dreams for Airtel across the world. So in that sense, Airtel is already a substantial multinational company with presence in more than 16 countries and so on. Could you discuss for us what is you've accomplished so much. What is the next leap that you want to make?
Well, there are going to be a handful of Indian companies in the next couple of decades which will have enough and more to go global. And for the first time, we are also listening to the signals from the government and the political leadership where they are encouraging us to go overseas. Airtel is one of the few companies which is present now in 16 countries outside India with its own brand, with its own people in key positions, and relying a lot on the stuff that we do here in India. This is the beginning, I would say, of Indian companies that I was talking about. Once you have the scale and the size, then you can really go outside. And given that you have invested nearly $60-70 billion here in the country, that base has been well established, and you'll spend about $3 to $4 billion a year in the country, but you have more capacity, more capital, both human and financial, to go out. UK, we have already made a big move, as you know. We've gone and picked up a 25% stake in BT. There are many other companies in Europe in telecom which are likely to be available. And it's one area where I would say a homegrown, rooted company right here in India could possibly become the world's largest telecom company in the next 10 years. That's a dream to behold for any Indian and for India. And I think you will start to see 8-10 more companies emerging in the same way. And when you carry Indian brand outside, it's not just India's capital asset base grows. You also open those markets for other Indian companies that follow. And I always use the same metaphor that I used at the earlier summit. When Americans go to a country, if they see 2 golden arches, McDonald's, they feel it's a good place to do business. I truly hope some of us as Indian branded companies could have the same impact and effect on those who follow on the footsteps of the pioneering Indian companies that go outside.
So why don't you help us break some news and tell us which are these assets in Europe that you're looking at?
I can only talk about Africa, where we already are, and UK, where we are in British Telecom. Other targets are best remain within our eyes and folds, because these are not easy targets. They have to go through a process. And keep in mind that digital connectivity has also become a security issue. And that is where I feel very confident that India will be very easily accepted, where many other large nations may not be. So we have that way some advantage in these countries.
But can you say some active matchmaking is underway, or it's general scoping?
No, I would say It's just a blue sky thinking at the moment.
Thank you. Priya, let me come to you. One of the sectors that is hardest to read today, to my mind at least, is India's consumer sector. There are often conflicting reports, and you're not able to quite tally the economic trends with company results and so on. Could you give us an overview of what is really going on? And Priya, of course, oversees some of India's best-known consumer brands, absolute household names. So nobody better to tell us what's actually happening in this sector.
Yeah, I think I'll come back to the opportunity first of consumer goods. If you look at consumer goods in India today, the per capita consumption of consumer goods in the country is about $54 per capita. If you compare that with any other part of the world, even our neighboring countries, Southeast Asia, it's extremely on the low side. So there's a huge headroom for consumer goods in India. So I think the first thing for us to keep in mind is the incredible headroom there is for consumption-led growth in India. As India grows, the consumer goods sector is poised for growth. So I think that's important to keep in mind. There are many short-term effects of food inflation, rural demand, urban demand not being sufficient. But I think with the measures we are seeing now, whether it is a good monsoon, whether it is the GST measures that have come in, I think we should expect gradual improvement in consumer demand.
What are the trends in, when you look at urban India and people on the, premiumization has been a very, very strong trend. But how is a house like HUL catering to, the youth of today, the Instagram generation?
Sure.
How do you compete with all these D2C brands? How you, give us a flavor of all of that, the challenge from the quick commerce channels.
Yeah. So I think first, I'll go back to what Sunil said. There are 1.4 billion Indians. And I think when you want to be a large consumer goods company, you have to go across the length and breadth of India. And I think that's when you create a real enterprise of depth and scale in India. And I think I will speak about HUL, but it's true of the consumer goods sector. I think the value of the consumer goods sector today is in segmenting India. Not just the top 100 million Indians where we're talking about a lot of the shift that is taking place, but across the 1.4 billion Indians that exist. And that's why I started with the topic of inclusive growth. And I think today there are business models, and what's exciting about the consumer sector in India is the incredible shift that's taking place with consumers wanting and desiring more benefits, more value-added products. And I think that's the journey that the consumer goods sector in India is on.
So is D2C a problem, or you feel a house like yours can more than adequately?
Yeah, I think, as I said, it is an incredible opportunity because we can now segment different parts of India. Whether you look at the opportunity, and let me give you an example. You look at the opportunity that you have now to segment the top 100 million Indians because there is an emerging different channel of commerce, whether it is quick commerce, D2C, digital commerce, but also what's happening with digital in terms of media. You are able to now segment and reach different audiences in India, and that provides a company the opportunity to serve niche consumer segments which you weren't able to serve before.
But do companies like yours have to think about these things differently? Because you're seeing a lot of young people, younger consumers value authenticity a lot. They connect with founders. They're drawn to that individual story and so on. So how does conventional company or legacy firms, how can you tackle that, or how can you compete with that?
Yeah, I actually think it's very, very exciting what's taking place. Because what's happening is consumers are more aware than they were ever before. And actually, it serves well to companies who are dependent on deep science, technology, R&D, and all the billions of dollars we spend to develop patented products. We can now take this out to consumers. So the fundamentals of what consumers are looking for isn't changing. Whether it's great products, great brands, packaged in a beautiful way, with deep science and technology, the way you build those brands indeed are changing, and I think that's what you're referencing. And all companies are working towards these shifts. And it's very exciting that the journey we are on.
High inflation was a problem for consumer demand. This year we've seen actually very low inflation, but not necessarily a corresponding boom in consumption. What explains that?
Yeah, I think when you look at headline inflation, it certainly seems low, but when you actually break that down, food inflation indeed has been very high, and consumer sentiment and demand has been subdued for the last few years. I think we do expect a gradual shift, and especially with the reforms taking place, especially in urban India, this is a key impetus.
Uday, let me come to you now. One of the comments that I saw recently, which made me think, was from the esteemed Kotak fund manager, equities head, Mr. Sanjeev Prasad, who talked about how in this wave of IPO money, in the flood of IPO money we have seen recently, or IPOs we have seen recently, a large portion of that is OFS and secondaries, and very little is actually going into plant and machinery and into the companies. Is this a structural problem? How do you view this?
You got to divide it into two parts. First is a lot of companies have raised money in their companies through private equity. So one of the biggest growth engines in the unlisted space is the advent of the private equity industry, which has supported companies through the growth phase. And we've seen that dramatically change. Having said that, you reached a point where valuations in India compared to other global valuations have been much higher as multiples. And you can look at any sector. I think Priya's consumer sector, Hindustan Unilever multiples are much higher than Unilever multiples, and that's true across sectors, LG, Hyundai, name it. Therefore, whether it's private equity industry or strategics, we today sit with $800 billion of foreign portfolio money at stock, and probably $1 trillion of stock of strategics. And the strategics for FDI purposes include private equity as well. So if your valuations are 30, 40, 50, 100, 300% higher than comparable valuations in Korea or China or any other part of the world, money moves. So what you're seeing is people seeing the opportunity of Indian markets, relative valuations, at a time when we have seen a flood of retail money coming directly and through mutual funds. And this flood has given opportunity for people to exit at much better multiples compared to what is available in other parts of the world. Therefore, it has been a one-way trend over the last 18 months, foreigners selling, Indians buying directly and through mutual funds. Mutual fund industry has had a record time. You've seen share of mutual funds, which in 2020 was 15% compared to bank deposits, is now getting close to 40% compared to bank deposits. And if I look at the next 5 or 7 years, this ratio will probably be close to 1:1. Therefore, when such a vast and structural movement is happening, you will have a situation where people will sell. And public markets give the exit. There are buyers on the other side. So for every seller in the public market, there's a buyer. Having said that, I think I agree with Sunil's point. Most of Indian manufacturing and businesses are not investing enough for the future. Whether it's innovation, whether it's research, whether it's taking bold calls. And Sajjan is also here. We are becoming quarter se quarter tak. We have to get out of that and really think how we are building India for the next 5 to 10 years. And unfortunately, there's a lot more Indian business can do on that. Thank you.
The one context I would like to add to that is, the metric that Mr. Mittal mentioned, spending on R&D. As a percentage of the GDP, R&D spending in the US and China are, 7%, 5%, 6%. In India, it's less than 1%. It's about 0.8% of the economy. 100% lot of scope for improvement there. But Uday, I also want to talk to you a little bit, two more themes. One quick one is about the currency. The historic understanding, of course, is that if the economy is doing well, the currency kind of reflects the underlying strength of the economy in relative terms. But the rupees, while our numbers are looking very good, top line growth figures, the rupee is at historic lows, but it's also underperforming emerging market peers. Could you give a prognosis of?
I think currency is driven by, amongst various factors, two very important factors. One is your current account, and second is investment flows. The current account in India is reasonably under control despite US tariffs. So if we say close to $50 billion of net exports is at risk because of US tariffs, current account probably will be 1.3% of GDP. I think India can support that. Yes, we want to get the exports back, including to the US, but it's not something which is going to disproportionately affect currency. It will on the margin. Also keep in mind, within our current account, it's gold. Gold is part of current account, and gold imports are at record levels. Every Indian now has started thinking about gold in his or her portfolio. Therefore, we are importing more gold, which is also putting some pressure on the current account. So that's one side of the equation. On the other side is what I just discussed. You have a $1.8 trillion stock of FPI plus FDI. Indians have tasted the wonders of equity investing, particularly post-COVID. And they're enjoying the ride. And if you think about a small person, and Lalit partly is responsible for that, if you think about a small person in UP and he puts money into a small cap fund, he doesn't understand where he is investing. He's going on the basis of past 3 years' performance. But that money is going irrespective of PE ratio. If a fund manager gets money, he or she is putting it there. Similarly for other funds. On the other hand, you have portfolio investors who are not restricted to India, or even the private equity guys. They can invest anywhere in the world. Therefore, if Indian PE for a consumer product company is 60, and the same company is available at a PE of 15 with a growth differential not dramatically different in Korea, the fund manager overseas will move his money. And that is the main reason, in my view, for the pressure on the currency is partly gold imports in the current account and significantly pressure on portfolio and FDI on the investment account.
Do you see the situation changing in the near future?
I think the good news is we sit on $650+ billion of reserves. Even if I take the forward shorts of the central bank, we are still in between $550 to $600 billion of reserves. Therefore, we have enough firepower. I think Indian industry has to get far more competitive. Why are we not at the cutting edge of exports? If there's one thing which has bothered me, and I'm glad Sunil is taking it forward, we need to build global consumer brands from India. Why is it that India is not at the cutting edge of excellence? This is what I would really want each of us in Indian business to be thinking about. Not just easy, domestic, large, protected market as the basis of making money. How are we competing with the best in the world, anywhere in the world? We like our Indian market, we like protection, we like tariffs to protect us, which is good. I'm not against that. But where is competitiveness of Indian exports to take on the world? Look at China. It's an unbelievable level of trade surplus they are running right now. And India-China is net $100 billion India imports from China.
So, Mr. Jindal, let me come to you. I personally find it a bit hard to read the economy at the moment. The headline growth numbers, as I said, indeed very, very impressive. Even the ADBS yesterday said 7.2% growth. As a head of a large diversified conglomerate, are you feeling that level of economic activity?
You want honest opinion?
100%, always.
No, I'm not feeling that that the economy is really growing at 7.2 or 8% in the last quarter. So I'm not feeling that. But having said that, India still is the brightest spot in the world, and the best chance that we have is India. But just to answer Uday's point that why Indian industry is not export competitive or why we are not exporting. So I must say that we have, as an industry, I'm here, I'm talking about myself, I'm not talking about the whole country, but I would say that this can be generalized, that we have, first of all, we are trying to meet our own demand in India. We are not yet there to meet our own demand. We have many industries where we are still import dependent, and but in many areas we are also very competitive globally. If you look at the auto components, we are very large exporter of auto components. We are very efficient industry. But there are many other factors where Indian industry is not yet very competitive because of our cost of logistics, our cost of finance, and there are many factors which pushes us down to become globally competitive. So yeah, that's my take, Uday, on why we are not able to export. But what Sunil said, that the way Airtel is going global, I'm sure there are many companies in India are looking to go global and make a mark for themselves.
What about private capex? Uday said very emphatically, as indeed I've now heard from several policymakers as well, that Indian industry needs to do more, become more competitive, invest in R&D. And the other thing that policymakers are both in Bombay as well as in Delhi are asking of the industry is more private capex. It is certainly happening in several sectors. You are certainly investing, many top houses are certainly investing, but as a whole and as a percentage of GDP, it has come down and it's not picking up. What do you think is the reason for that?
You know, you're putting all the difficult questions to me.
Yes.
So the private capital, why it's not forming or coming into India or into the industry, why industry is not spending, is that we have this mindset in our bureaucracy, in our whole system, where they tend to hate if we make money. If the industry makes too much money, then there is always a question mark, and then they try to create issues that we should not be making that much money. But they don't understand that what that does is that we are actually, industry is only going to grow the industry and make it more competitive. But the whole concept is little, we are still having that mindset of the socialist era, where we tend to feel that the industry must not make too much money. So that's why the private capital or private industry is not really taking that risk anymore. And secondly, the era of bankruptcy that happened over the last 10, 15 years, where the IBC code came in, today the new entrepreneurs are not willing to take that kind of risk, what we took when I was growing up, when I took that risk. Today, nobody will take that risk. So the laws and all, maybe we become a mature economy, but the fact is that today the industry will not take that kind of a leap to take that risk.
When you were young, you went to a banker and said, I want to build a plant that rivals Tata Steel. Can you relate that story for our audience?
No. So I was always, as a kid, I always dreamt of building a steel plant. And when the opportunity came, when 91, when Narasimha Rao's government liberalized the steel industry and we were allowed to build integrated steel plants, so it was my real desire to build one. And I went to Mr. Wagul, he was then the chairman of ICICI, and I told him that I want to build an integrated steel plant. He told me that, and the size of the plant was equal to what Tata Steel was at that time. And he said that, son, you know, you are trying to build something which has taken 90 years at that time, 90 years for Tata Steel. I said, yeah, but where is the demand, where is the market, he asked me. I said, if any amount of steel will sell, it will be Jindal Steel. So that time I called myself. So I was always like that, said it will be my steel and not any other steel that will sell. So don't worry about the market. And the rest is history.
So with this generation of entrepreneurs, you hear a lot of such stories. So you had an audacious dream, you went to a banker, and the banker was the person to convince in those days. They would have hundreds of such stories and so on. But Lalit, in your generation of entrepreneurs are looking at a different kind of risk. The bank credit is not even a suitable instrument for your kind of businesses. It is venture capital, and of course now public markets are embracing you guys with great enthusiasm. Could you take us through the journey of building Grow and what that says about building a new age business in contemporary India?
Sure. So we come from tech background. Like, we don't build factories and we don't need to set up. So it's mostly human capital. And if you're building a product, then you need to get bunch of engineers, build product and so on. And you need to pay salaries. So internet companies typically need capital from that perspective, investing into the product, building the product and so on. And that's why VCs become the choice, because they are, anyways, in US, they have made a lot of money on companies like Google and Facebook and so on. So that's their model, that they kind of underwrite on some future potential with some burn in initial days, and not predictability of, like when we started 10 years back, nine and a half years back, I don't think we had this predictability, we will start making revenue and this rate and so on. There is, of course, some idea that money will come and so on, but monetization is kind of question mark, and that's why VCs come into picture. I think it's very well established formula, so nothing kind of new in that for us.
Very, very modest of you. But who was your Mr. Vagul? If Mr. Jindal went to Mr. Vagul way back, who was the person you went to and said, hey, I have this crazy dream. I think discount broking could take off in India.
So when I was at Flipkart, Mukesh and Ankit were working. So Mukesh was the CEO at that time, and Ankit was the chief business officer, and they knew me very well. And I think they bet on us when we did not know what we are going to do. We are just kind of a team. We thought, okay, this investing is very complicated. We come from this consumer product mindset, Product should be simple, transparent, easy, and so on. Very rough idea, and those were our Mr. Yeah.
And, yours is also an interesting case where, in your category, you already had an important player who was quite successful. That never gave you pause?
So we never thought from category. See, when we come to Bombay, or when we got listed also, we talk about we are broker, or we are mutual fund distributor, or in fact, when we started, we did not even think that we will ever become a broker, because broking is a way to serve the customer, right? So we always come from the customer mindset. The idea was to build like investing easy for customers. And then we realized, to make that, you first need to become a mutual fund distributor. So we got this NISM exam or whatever, you give that, take a mutual fund distribution license. You start that, then customers are, we need direct mutual funds. Then customers say, we want to buy stocks. So you need broking license. So you become a broker, then, and so on, right? So I think the way we look at it is, you are building for customer, and then whatever is needed, then you do that.
Dr. Singhvi, let me come to you now. You made some very important points in your opening remarks. You talked about the need for judicial reforms. Enforcement of contracts is one of the things that fuel ease of doing business. It is not great in India. Like, what does India need to do to reform and make enforcement of contracts easier?
Well, it's a much larger question of reforms in the administration of justice. But in the limited time, I think it's vital to go for the very important virtues in any legal system, the virtues of predictability, certainty, security. And that cannot happen unless there is a timeline on everything. It is very ironic and sad, and I've been speaking and writing on this subject for 3 decades, that under our very noses, our already mammoth pendency of 3.5 crores has now reached over 5.5 crores. while each one of us has been sermonizing, seminarizing, speaking, writing reports, setting up committees, as a very wise wag put it, a committee is a group of the unfit appointed by the unwilling to do the unnecessary. So, under our noses, this has happened. Now, unless you do it on a... And let me tell you, this is not an insurmountable problem. Most of these arrears will go like a pack of cards. But you need a consistency of purpose. You need a 5-year plan between 5 Chief Justices. They can agree to disagree on a lot of other issues, but they must agree that these 10 things we agree on and implement that. And most of these arrears will go away. But that is one part. The other is that the artery of the legal system is so clogged that you need to not only push the things along that artery, but also to declog it by what is now we have a brand new act, mediation. Till now, alternative dispute resolution has worked only for a particular category of smaller matters, not for the big corporate disputes which Sajjan may have or which Sunil may have. Now you have a spanking new excellent act. If we bring in the mediation culture, one major way would be to declog the arteries of 5.5 crore cases, is to take a chunk out and subject them to much shorter, quicker mediation, because the original ADR, the original alternative dispute resolution was arbitration, which has failed completely because arbitration has become what somebody rightly said is pre-litigation litigation. So you need to do these things and you need to do it consistently. And unfortunately in our country, everybody wants to leave a stamp and therefore there are knee-jerk, mid-course corrections. You need to give it 5-year push on 1 or 2 or 5 things and it will start showing results.
Do you have a view on the reform that has now allowed foreign law firms to operate in India?
Well, I think that was an idea whose time had come a long time ago. It is quite often misunderstood as being flooded with foreign lawyers. Let me assure you that 99% of foreign lawyers you meet have no joy and pride in coming and appearing in courts with us in Indian courts. That's a misconception. It's been a series of, reasons for it, both vested and non-vested interests. But I think it's for the good. I think it is a more efficient way of doing it. But it'll take at least 4 or 5 years before that culture entrenches. So you'll have more efficient. In fact, if it really goes well, it will increase both the employment and the earnings of Indian lawyers, because most of these firms will use them. But that's not going to solve our endemic indigenous problem, which is arrears, which has a multitude of factors, starting with appointments and delayed appointments.
Are you hopeful? And you're absolutely right when you say that there has been no dearth of commissions, reports. When it comes to judicial reforms, police reforms, administrative reforms, there have been numerous reports, commissions. So there is no dearth of recommendations, knowledge, body of knowledge with regard to what needs to be done. Are you hopeful that? And I'm not minimizing the how big a task and how complex a task it is. A lot of it needs reforms of acts, Parliament to move, etc. But are you hopeful that things will improve substantially?
Well, of course, I am hopeful, and I don't think we have much of an option except to be optimistic while being realistic. We can't be pessimistic about this. But I don't think it's such an insurmountable problem, frankly. I think that if, just 5-7 things are taken up and all the 3 organs focus on them and bit of shedding of egos, bit of more cooperation, a large chunk of this can be managed. I mean, tell me one reason why. I know the retirement age of every judge who's sitting here from the day he's appointed 10 years ago. A simple rule of appointing his successor a week before he retires, and you'll get away with this 33% vacancies, this 25% vacancies. It's like saying that you have spanking new hospitals and equipment, medical equipment, but no doctors. So how can you deal with patients? So these are things which you need to address. And frankly, I believe that if this audience, which is 90% a non-law audience, 95% a lay audience, were told to select appointments to the bench, blindfolded and going across 10 high courts within a month, they would all be able to do it because everybody knows who are the eligible ones. So what we do is we select the appointees and then we start disappointing them instead of appointing them. So this is the kind of politics which has to stop. Of course, along with technology is a big thing, aggregation of cases, subject-wide disposal, mass disposals, evening courts. There's a whole lot of things, but you need to take 10 of them and implement them with a unity of purpose and a focus, which sadly has been missing at several levels. Sometimes a bureaucracy, sometimes other sectors.
Debashish, on the subject of AI, you look at it from a broad prism. There clearly are two AI superpowers in the world today, and that is the United States and China. India is attracting a lot of investment in AI infrastructure in terms of data centers and so on. But we're not as yet an AI superpower. It involves a lot of compute, a lot of electricity, a lot of talent. A lot of Indian minds are very big in AI. They're among the top folks in AI. What should be India's approach to this coming era to gain competitiveness in this regard?
See, interestingly, although there is a general conception that India missed the bus, the AI journey is just starting. And if you look at even in the US context, the enterprise level AI hasn't taken off. Okay, so it's all at the consumer end. And AI being a probabilistic tool, it's good to ask which Bangalore park to go for a jog. Okay, but what India needs today is it needs a lot of compute power, and that compute should like Sunil has provided the data at lowest cost. I think the Indian compute also should come at a price where token would make sense. And second is we need to have our own Indic language foundation models. You cannot have, you need not have trillion parameter models or that holy grail of chasing AGI. We need to have models which can tell a farmer, given the soil condition, moisture, what crop to go for and what solution to have. So that's why I mentioned in my opening remark also, given that we have this digital public infrastructure, which is basically now an identity plus payment, on top of that layer, if you put compute plus model plus the the apps, it can do wonders to new business models will emerge. Like this business model emerged from DPI 1.0. 2.0, it can be used in education, in skilling, in healthcare, in MSME. Because, coming back to the question of innovation, see, India has cracked to the capital and labor part of it. As been mentioned, that if you have to improve the total factor productivity, you have to be innovative and use of, digital and other cutting edge technology to make Indian manufacturing and every segment globally competitive. Otherwise, you cannot do export. It's all linked to that innovation and use of cutting-edge technology.
Mr. Mittal, let me come to you on a more current topic. After the events in the civil aviation sector in the last few weeks, there is a lot of thinking about concentration risk. One player having a lot of market share, or two players in any sector amounting to a disproportionate market share. Telecom is a virtual duopoly in that sense. Two players have a very large market share. What do you think should India's policy approach be towards de-risking from concentration risk?
Well, I think in telecom, while two operators are dominant at the moment, there are two more. And there is still Vodafone Idea, and as you have seen, government is planning to give them some significant concessions. And then there is state-run BSNL. Now, telecom is a bit different than airlines. One, you have to have a nationwide network, which means to say yes to telecom, you need to at least commit $30 to $40 billion to begin. And you can't have multiple digital highways, just like you can't have multiple roads. You can't have 5 parallel roads running, So there's an amount of limitation from that point of view. In airlines, you can actually, with 5, 10, 15 planes, you can start a decent level of service, which is not possible in telecom. So I would say world over, if you see US, down to 3 operators, UK down to 3 operators, France is going from 4 to 3 now, Italy has just gone to 3, most of Africa is 2 operators. The government has a very strong tool in their hands, which is TRAI, to see if there's at all market abuse. They can intervene at a very short notice, and it doesn't take time there. But yes, more competition is always welcome. We have always maintained 3 private operators is a good place to be. But anything more than that perhaps will be an overkill.
Uday, quickly on the RBI allowing recently Indian banks to do financing of M&A. Is that going to change the landscape significantly?
I think first of all, it's a good thing because globally, banks finance acquisitions. India is probably pretty late in terms of timing. Share financing and acquisition financing for Indian banking got shut in post-1992 securities scandal. And it's taken more than 30 years for us to revisit that, and I compliment the RBI for opening it. Having said that, there are significant amount of regulatory norms which have been put in place. Therefore, I don't think it's going to fly to the extent it needs to. Therefore, hopefully over time, as the regulator gets more confidence, it will open up even further. So, good move, but lots more to be done.
Wonderful. 5 minutes left on the clock, so we'll do a quick rundown, closing comments. What is, one change in mindset we as a society or at an individual level need, and what is one policy reform India needs to stay on course with this dream of becoming a first world economy? This time we will start from reverse with Debashish. Thank you.
I think we have a lot to do, again, coming back to probably at the cost of repeating. You have to have an innovative mindset. And as they mentioned in the beginning, we need to come out of this quarter se quarter kind of mindset and think more longer term. And one reform, as the senior lawyer mentioned, I think the judiciary reform and use of technology to remove some of these backlogs of 55 million cases, that would go a long way, because there is some reluctance in, I think, use of technology in certain segments. That can go a long way. Yeah.
Lovely. Dr. Singhvi?
This is the T20 round. Yes. So, as far as the area of reform, I've already talked about the judiciary. I think there is significant scope for further reform in labor. We made a start, but that is baby moves, according to me. Significant push to manufacturing sector, which is being offset at the moment with this growth story of India because of the services sector. But you need to consider the manufacturing sector, and we need labor reform as a bedrock of that. As far as mindset is concerned, I think the larger mindset, which is partly the sardine mentality, not being happy when the other chap is making money. This thing has to change as far as the economic ecosystem is concerned. I think this push that money making can be done with regulation, can lead to jobs, can help everybody, that has to start with the bureaucracy. Let me tell you, that is where it is the worst. And it has to then spread evenly over other sectors. Judicial reforms I've already talked about.
Thank you. Lalit?
From mindset perspective, I think we should be able to imagine that we can build very large global companies from India. That's on the mindset side. Reform, I don't think I have any comment on that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Sajjan?
I think what Lalit said, that mindset that we can be world beaters, and we can build companies which can be global in size, global in quality, global in technology. So that's some mindset that we really need to build. That is one. And second, as Sunil said, that we cannot do the first thing unless we innovate, unless we invest in innovation and R&D, which Indian companies are not doing. So we need to do that.
Well, I think we are in an incredible moment in time in history where India is growing. There's a restless youth out here. We have a very strong political leader who wants India to grow. If in 2047 we'll not get to $30 trillion, we'll get to $22, $23 trillion. India will be a very big power. this is the moment, to my mind, for everybody to double down. Private capital is there, foreign capital is there. I think India needs to take bigger, bolder bets, and the political leadership should encourage that.
Thank you, Uday.
Purpose, passion, paranoia. Paranoia is the most important. Most Indians in today's world have started believing in what I call as a cruise mode. We have arrived. It's time for us to believe that we have a long way to go. We've got to be hungry and foolish. That's what we really need to do as every Indian to build India for the future.
Thank you, Priya.
I wanted to end on a positive note to remind all of us that, we are the fastest growing large economy in the world. This should be the decade of India. We have to make sure that the demographic dividend of India is realized, and the restless population of the young people of India deserve us to really come together and create the future of India. So I think, it's really about us coming together, but India deserves this.
Wonderful. Lot of insightful comments. Thank you so much for that discussion, and thank you all for being a wonderful audience. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining.